So Sammunati's journey started in this very place, IIT Madras Research Park, Incubation Cell and RTBI. So I'm grateful to Professor and Tama Jaya for letting Sammunati start its journey very much in this campus way back in 2014. Maybe not way back in 2014. Right. And the word Sammunati exists for collective growth, collective prosperity, and collective elevation. The word collective being very, very relevant and the driving force for us. Why we exist as an organization and what we are pursuing to make why we exist as an organization a reality are these two statements. We exist to make markets work for smallholder farmers, because the realization and belief of having worked in the rural and agri inclusive space for about 30 years of my career, markets have been working off the smallholder farmer. Can we remove the word off and replace that with for? Is why Sammunati exists as an organization. And the tool that we are looking at bringing about to fruition is by making the agri value chains operate at a higher equilibrium and thereby bringing about a collective prosperity and collective elevation. That's how we are looking at. We are an execution focused entity. In other words, we are the field people. We don't understand the frameworks and theoretical structures and papers. We are debit credit people, and this journey has been quite accelerating, so to say, on the numbers front. We work with close to 1,800 farmer collectives now, with a cumulative membership base of about 6 million smallholder farmers. This represents the production side of the agri value chain. And we also work with about 5,000 agri enterprises on the demand side. And the two engines that we have to bring about the vibrancy, the throughput in the agri value chains are the market linkages that we do and the agri finance that we do. And between these two, we have done a little over 10,000 crores in this last 5-6 years with a cost of risk of about 0.4%. Whenever we talk about lending to agriculture, the next question is, do you get your money back? We have got 99.6% of the money back so far, right? So that's what we look at. But then just a lending in agriculture is not sufficient. While finance is important, what makes it more valuable both for the player and the actors in agriculture are lays credit as the core and then bring about market linkages, advisory services, and working with other players in the agri value system as part of the overall proposition. And that's what we have been doing. Now, getting into the topic, imagining India, I thought I would share a few thoughts within these 12 minutes on how are we looking at people from the field, people from the ground, how are we looking at India from the activity perspective, which is farming, and from the perspective of the actor, the farmer, predominantly smallholder farmer. And if you look at from the activity perspective, agriculture is humongous. Most of us know, and hence I didn't want to trouble you with all statistics in terms of smallholder farmers, the TAM, and the unmet demand, all of that, because this is the third day of the of this program. But what we all know is, while this market is large, it's fragmented in its functional approach, right? Taking a cue from the function and concept. All these players exist in the market, but most of the engagement is around the markets, whether they are physical or electronic. They are all centered around the places of exchange of goods and cash, and not centered around the activity, which is the farming. And in this milieu, farmer is one of the players. How do we imagine going forward? If we have to imagine India in 2047, it is not a choice, but it is important that we put that gentleman, that lady at the center, the farmer at the center, and then imagine the entire agri ecosystem around this person. What does the farming be? How is it relevant without understanding the farmer, who has to interact, interplay, engage with the external players beyond the 2.5 acres or 3 acres of land that he has. And the moment you put the farmer at the center, this entire ecosystem that is fragmented starts making sense, right? The input guys have a role to play, the output guys have a role to play, the banks have a role to play, the research institutions like ICAR and MS Swaminathan Foundation or what have you, they have a role to play, government has a role to play, financiers have a role to play, but role to play for what? Role to play to make the activity relevant. But then the moment you bring in that, we also talk about, hey, but a large number of farmers are smallholder farmers and it is not economically viable to be able to engage with a smallholder farmer, and that's where the collectivization of farmers comes into picture, and that's what is the potential that we are imagining as there is an increased emphasis on the collectivization. The FPOs as a movement that we are witnessing bodes well for this entire imagining India from the perspective of putting the farmer at the center. But the moment you put the farmer at the center, how do we harmonize this journey of each of these guys interfacing with the farmer? And that is where the entire tech comes into the picture, right? It's not the intent to make the agri value chain providers work together, but can we lace in the technology into making this happen? And this is where we are looking at a digital connector that enables an entity like Sammunati. We wish there are at least 100 more Sammunatis in the foreseeable future. An entity like Sammunati making this journey between the agri players and the farmer possible. Harmonize this journey so that we become window to the world for the smallholder farmer and access to the last mile for the smallholder farmers. And if you just take a look at why this is important, each of these segments, take inputs as a segment, is completely fragmented. The seeds guys are different from the crop protection chemical guys. The crop protection chemical guys are different from the farm equipment guys. Again, within seeds, you see organic, not organic, genetically modified, hybrid. And then you double click on the organic guys, then there will be a set of players who are focusing on that. And each of these guys, these companies would want to engage with the smallholder farmer, but they have nothing to do with the rest of the ecosystem. Within inputs, again, go to the crop protection chemicals, someone focusing on fertilizers, someone focusing on pesticides, someone looking at jo ugata hai, dusra marta hai, right? How do you harmonize this? And each of them again want to engage with this guy, but they don't want to do the rest of it. Banks want to lend to the smallholder farmer. They have nothing to do with the input or output. The output guys say, hey, if you produce, I will want to procure, but I have nothing to do with your procurement, with your cultivation. I have everything to do with your procurement. And the research entities have been coming out with multiple structures and innovations, but are they invested in the input, output, lending? Where is their skin in the game, right? So when we harmonize this journey through technology is when we imagine India in the future, which is all focused on farmer at the center and focused on how to make this happen. Now then, how do we understand this actor? Well, we understood the activity, the ecosystem of the activity. How do you understand the actor? And this is something that we have learned in these last 30 years of engaging with the farmer households. And I have got the inspiration from Maslow's hierarchy of needs while putting up this slide. The first need for a smallholder farmer is access to finance. Right? That's a physiological need. Because there is a huge exclusion, huge number of people not part of formal financial structure is why access to finance becomes the very first requirement. And as we all know, again, each of the need gets built over the previous need. People start thinking about the next need only when they have the earlier need fulfilled. Someone who has access to finance would start looking at access to customized finance, which is critical for agriculture, because a paddy growing farmer would require money for 3 months or 4 months, whereas a sugarcane growing farmer would require money for 1 year. Even for 1 year, if you give an equated monthly installment structure to a sugarcane growing farmer, it doesn't make sense, right? It doesn't make sense. But in the absence of it, they would take what you have to offer to them because they don't have a choice. But putting the farmer at the center, and if you reimagine how do you look at engaging, then access to customized finance becomes relevant so that a paddy growing farmer would get for 3 months, a sugarcane growing farmer would get 1 year, and both are linked to the cash flows associated with each of the value chains. The moment you have customized finance is when they start looking at market linkages, right? Hey, how do I link to different markets? is the aggregation of quality, aggregation of quantity, or understanding what the market requirements are, how far, when is the right time to sell. The entire plethora of initiatives that are required to make market linkages go to the farm gate would be the next requirement that the farmer would be looking at. And the moment you fulfill the market linkages as a requirement, the farmers would want to look at the niche markets, organic versus non-organic, exports, sustainable agricultural practices, specific value chains like millets, where the probability of a little extra always remains, but is there some support that we can give them in terms of advisory services, in terms of technologies that are required, certification processes, right, or access to better markets so that they know this is how they can access these markets. All of this come under the advisory services. And the self-actualization structure of this is, should there be a fall because of any of these not working, is there a guarantee that is available? And that guarantee could be for the player, like Sammunati, to the actor, like the farmer, and the activity, which is farming. So to sum up, how we have to look at bringing innovation to imagine India in 2047 is, we have been looking at navigating this pyramid from the bottom-up approach, which is access to finance. That's where you see nationalization of banks and regional rural banks and all of this. Can we tilt that and come from a market-led approach? And it is the market-led approach that would imagine India in 2047 with the farmer at the center. So I stop here. Thank you.